The Senate Special Committee on Aging will come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Aging Committee's first hybrid hearing of this Congress, with members having the option to attend in person or online. So welcome, everyone. This hearing will focus on the challenges individuals face when working to achieve long-term financial security and save for a stable retirement. All Americans worry about their economic future, especially as we grow older. For people with disabilities, finances, savings, and income are especially worrisome issues. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2020, across all age groups, people with disabilities were much less likely to be employed than those with no disabilities. The same report found that across all educational attainment groups, unemployment rates for people with a disability were higher than for those without a disability. Because people with disabilities are less likely to be employed and much more likely to be underemployed, their lifetime earnings are far less than the average citizen. And because family members are often forced to quit their jobs to help care for other family members, family income has often been significantly limited. For these families, Congress has removed some of the barriers to saving and to planning for the future. The bipartisan Stephen E. Beck Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, or as we know it by the acronym, the ABLE Act, which Senator Burr and I led in the Senate when it passed in 2014, this act makes it possible for people with disabilities to save for the future. With an ABLE account, people with disabilities can save for the future without losing their federal disability benefits, such as supplemental security income or Medicaid. With the opening of ABLE accounts in 43 states, over 91,000 people have been able to save over $759 million, an average of over $8,300 per account. These essential assets allow people to open their own businesses, save for retirement, purchase the technology they need, and so much more. That includes, in my home state of Pennsylvania, over 5,200 people who have used ABLE accounts to save over $57 million so far. One such Pennsylvanian is a member of our witness panel today, Dr. Badger, who will tell us how an ABLE account helped her buy her first home. ABLE has made building wealth a real possibility for millions of Americans, but our work on this issue is not done. ABLE accounts are not available to all people with disabilities. To open an account, a person has to acquire their disability prior to their 26th birthday. This needs to change. Many people acquire their disability after age 26, including over 1 million veterans. That's why Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas and I, along with 10 additional colleagues, 4 Republicans, 6 Democrats, have introduced Senate Bill 331, the Bipartisan Able Age Adjustment Act. The bipartisan House version, which is H.R. 1219, has been introduced by Representatives Tony Cardenas and Judy Chu of California and Kathy McMorris Rogers of the state of Washington. They've been joined by 39 Democrats and 20 Republicans to help pass this important legislation. The Able Age Adjustment Act will provide 6 million additional Americans with disabilities with the opportunity to open an ABLE account. The Able Age Adjustment Act legislation is an important step towards a more stable economic future for people with disabilities. But there remain other challenges which must be addressed. As we'll hear today, barriers to economic independence also plague many communities of color. Higher levels of poverty and unemployment have made it more difficult to save long-term for many people from African American, Latinx, and other diverse communities. This is a disturbing set of numbers I'm about to read. A 2020 report from the Federal Reserve, and that's obviously very recent, estimated that white families had 8 times the wealth of the typical black family and 5 times the wealth of the typical Hispanic family. No one can be satisfied with those numbers. The same report has also found that the asset-based net worth of white households was more than 4 times the level of black households. So as a nation, we've only begun to address the barriers to economic security for people with disabilities and communities of color as they age. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about these important issues and the progress we hope to be able to make. Before we begin, I want to remind committee members and witnesses to please keep remarks and questions to 5 minutes. Following opening remarks, senators will ask questions based on seniority, whether joining in person or by camera virtually. So, Ranking Member Scott, I'm pleased to turn it over to you for your opening remarks, and it's great to see you in person.
Thank you, Chairman Casey. It's good to see you in person as well. This is such an important committee, and we do good work under your leadership, and I appreciate the way that you've handled the responsibilities of chairing this committee and keeping our focus not on each other or each side, but on the American people, and specifically on seniors and folks with disabilities. It's really important for us to recognize that many of us are blessed, and we're blessed to serve in the United States Senate on behalf of our states and on behalf of people who need help. And one of the things I think about, Chairman Casey, as I ponder this conversation around retirement security is how fortunate we are to be in a position where we have retirement accounts connected to what we do. And so many times folks who have 100 employees or fewer don't have access to a retirement account. I know that's true here in Washington, D.C., as well it is true at home in South Carolina. And growing up in poverty has another impact on that wealth gap that you talked about, the difference between African Americans, Hispanics, and white folks on the amount of net worth they have. Typically can manifest in the equity in a home. And so if you don't have access to home ownership because of challenges, then you are going to see that wealth gap only increase. And as that wealth gap increases, we'll see that have an impact on how comfortable you are in retirement. So there are many pieces to the life puzzle of retirement that we will address today, and I am thankful that we have an opportunity to do so. I'm also thankful that as a kid growing up in poverty, I had the chance of meeting a small business owner who was my mentor, who started teaching me about financial literacy at 15, 16, and 17 years old, and that was a blessing that too many Americans do not have. Learning those lessons early in life allows for your retirement years to look very differently. Far too many Americans living paycheck to paycheck, including vulnerable populations facing poverty and some with disabilities. Retirement seems out of reach no matter how old you are. Too often you see good people who've worked all their lives having to continue to work well into what we would consider your traditional retirement years. For others, there are obstacles such as keeping your retirement plan when you're switching jobs. Getting access to a retirement plan when working for small businesses, as I just mentioned, is harder to do. In South Carolina, approximately 400,000 full-time employees do not have access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan. 200,000+ South Carolinians who are working part-time do not have access to a retirement plan. African Americans disproportionately have less access than other folks. Employers are a critical, major piece of this retirement puzzle. And one of the ways that we can help this is to make sure that employers have an easier access to establishing retirement plans. As a former small business owner myself, I know the passion that we have for our extended families that we see as our employees. We see our employees as a part of our extended families. And when we have an easier path to establishing, setting up retirement accounts for our employees, we look forward to that opportunity. We lean into that opportunity. And it does solve a lot of problems. When you are making between $30,000 and $50,000 a year, you have a 12 times more likely not to be able to save for your retirement unless you work at a place where they have a retirement system there. Despite wanting to, small employers find it difficult and often impossible to provide retirement plans because of administrative burdens, startup costs, fees, and liabilities. There's good news, though. The Secure Act, signed into law in December of 2019, makes it easier for small business owners to set up retirement plans that are less expensive and, frankly, much easier to administer. Today, we'll have the good fortune of hearing from an entrepreneur, a South Carolinian, John Iacofano, who is launching his company's first retirement plan today. Wonderful. I'm excited to hear from John. This new retirement plan is also the result of work by Matt Watson, a local advisor in Charleston, who is helping small businesses across the state launch their own plans. We have wonderful examples throughout the great state of South Carolina of these folks taking advantage of a simpler, more effective way of providing for retirement security for their employees. Biddy and Bo Coffee in Charleston is one of those great examples that comes to mind. This coffee shop specifically employs folks with disabilities, helping them achieve financial independence. Despite the struggles that so many Americans face, there is good news. 2/3 of Americans living in retirement over the age of 65 over the past 5 years say that retirement is becoming a little more comfortable. In 2019, 4 out of 5 Americans aged 65 and older reported having enough money to live comfortably. This all means the financial well-being of seniors has improved substantially in recent decades, and it gets better every single year. There is still more work to be done, and that's one of the reasons why we're working on what I would call Secure Act 2.0, a bill designed to help us solve some of these problems and overcome some of the challenges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Scott. Now we'll turn to our witnesses. And before I do that, I want to acknowledge the presence of Senator Blumenthal, who's here with us. We will have senators coming in and out today, as you know. Thursday morning is a busy committee morning. So we'll have senators coming in, sometimes coming in and having to leave and come back for questions. So we'll try to fit everybody in as they are available. But I want to turn to our first witness, Mr. Tom Foley. Mr. Foley is the Executive Director of the National Disability Institute. He has more than 30 years' experience in the disability community. He has dedicated his career to working to create pathways to employment and financial security for people with disabilities. So we welcome him. Our second witness is Mr. Rodney Brooks, a retirement columnist and author. He brings decades of experience writing on retirement, personal finance, and business issues for publications ranging from U.S. News and World Report, the Washington Post, and the Philadelphia Inquirer. He has committed his career to helping people prepare for retirement and save for the future. So we welcome Mr. Brooks. Third, our third witness is, as I mentioned earlier in my opening statement, Dr. Josie Badger from Newcastle, Pennsylvania. That's Lawrence County on the Ohio border in western Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh. Dr. Badger, is the founder of J. Badger Consulting Incorporated, where she provides youth development and disability consulting services for various organizations. And she is the campaign manager of the United Way of Southwestern Pennsylvania's, quote, hashtag I Want to Work campaign, where she works to improve, the employment of people with disabilities. She's also a person who knows firsthand the challenges people with disabilities face when trying to save for the long term. Due to the federal asset limit for many years, Dr. Badger was unable to save more than $2,000 without risking the loss of her federal benefits. That changed with the passage of the ABLE Act, which allowed her to finally save for her future. For our fourth witness, I'll turn to Senator Scott, our ranking member, to introduce Mr. Iacofano.
Thank you, Chairman Casey. It is my pleasure to introduce today John Iacofano. John is the owner of Iacofano's Catering in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. He is an entrepreneur, a leader, and a successful employer. I am proud of his work and the company he has built in my home state. With only $90 to his name and money coming in from a painting job, John opened his first location in February 2002. Today, John has 85 employees, 6 locations across the country, including Charleston, Denver, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. Iacofano's provides catering and food services to corporate events, weddings, in-flight service, senior living facilities, and meal service nonprofits such as Meals on Wheels, which proved so critically important during the peak of COVID-19. John's testimony today is about his efforts and success in offering a brand new retirement savings plan to his employees because of the passage of the Secure Act. I don't want to steal his thunder about what he's doing on his launch day for the retirement plan, but I look forward to hearing his comments. John, we truly appreciate your entrepreneurship and hard work offering new opportunities to your employees. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, Ranking Member Scott. Now we'll turn to our witnesses for their statements. We'll begin with Mr. Foley. Mr. Foley, you may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Scott, and other distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Thomas Foley. I'm the Executive Director of the National Disability Institute. But in addition to that, I'm someone who's blind, who has spent time on SSI, spent time on SSDI, but has managed over time to build an economic future for myself and my family. As was mentioned earlier, there are far too many barriers to economic advancement for people with disabilities. I still vividly remember as a freshman in college learning about the $2,000 asset limit because I was on SSI. I thought the person who told me that was actually joking. I wanted what everybody else did. I wanted to buy a home. I wanted a financial future, a job that led to a career, a family. I wanted the American dream, but I wasn't sure how I was going to accomplish the American dream if I wasn't allowed to save money. That $2,000 asset limit has not changed since I was a freshman in college, and that was a while ago. Simply put, asset limits and income limits discourage savings, work, and hope for people with disabilities. Many other factors complicate building an economic future. As was mentioned, people with disabilities have a difficult time finding stable full-time employment. Workforce participation rates in June, according to ODEP, the workforce participation rate for people with disabilities is 21% versus 67% for people without disabilities. It's nearly impossible to save for a long-term future without stable, competitive employment. In addition to that, recent research has shown that people with disabilities face additional costs that people without disabilities do not face. They average $17,000 a year. So these extra costs have to be met somehow as well. I was really lucky in high school as well, as was Senator Scott, to take a financial education course. I learned about saving money, how to avoid debt, how credit cards work, why it was so important to get a bank account. Recent data from the FDIC reports that people with disabilities are 3 times more likely to be unbanked, 16% versus 4.5%, than the rest of the population. It's difficult to build a financial future without the basic building blocks of a bank account or financial education and financial coaching for people with disabilities. Underlying much of this is an unspoken but palpable belief, sometimes by teachers, sometimes by employers, unfortunately, sometimes by friends and family, that folks with disabilities can't work and can't build a financial future. And sometimes people with disabilities internalize this. Fortunately, removal of policy barriers can change this narrative. One such policy action was the ABLE Act in 2014, as mentioned earlier. We have seen firsthand how this has changed people's lives. People buy homes, they go back to school, they start small businesses. Particularly for folks with disabilities who might have episodic or contractual work. We've seen that ABLE savings, that on average, that $8,000 per account, allows people to navigate periods of unemployment, remain financially financially resilient through economic downturns, and ultimately improve their short and long-term financial outcomes. Unfortunately, as currently written, the ABLE account leaves out lots of people from being able to access this tool and realize these benefits. Therefore, we strongly advocate for the passage of the ABLE Age Adjustment Act. Passing this will allow people with disability onset up to age 46 to open new accounts and expand the universe of ABLE accounts. We believe it'll increase utilization of accounts, and there are up to 6 million people who could benefit. In addition to that, we believe it strengthens the ABLE financial perspective and will create innovation within the ABLE space. In addition, it'll allow older Americans who have become disabled by chronic illness, by accident, or by military service to benefit from this program as well. Members of this committee, I started this testimony by talking about my American dream. I've achieved that. I bought the house. I have a solid retirement account. I put 2.5 kids through college, and I'm not particularly special. People do not need to change, systems do. And with your help today, we can begin to change those systems and increase financial security and economic outcomes for people with disabilities. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Foley, for your statement. Now we'll turn to Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks, you may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee. My name is Rodney Brooks. I'm a personal finance author and business journalist. I've written about retirement issues and wealth disparities for publications like U.S. News and World Report, Washington Post, USA Today, and National Geographic. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss some of the critical retirement issues faced by all Americans, especially some of the issues faced by older African Americans. Black women in particular face huge financial challenges as they age. You've all heard we're having a retirement crisis. That's because we aren't saving enough to sustain ourselves when we retire. We all realize it and we worry about it. 45% of baby boomers said outliving their retirement savings is one of their greatest fears. And there's good reason for that concern. 15% of Americans have no retirement savings at all. Today we're living longer, and thus we need for our retirement savings to last longer. Today, a couple aged 62, the surviving spouse will probably live until 92. In the past, we've had pensions that will provide financial resources for the rest of our lives. Our fathers and their fathers knew that their money would not run out and they would be taken care of. That's one of the reasons people work 25 or 30 years at one company. It wasn't just for the gold watch, it was for the pension. Today, pensions are largely a thing of the past. In 1975, pensions covered 40 million Americans. Today, only 13% of non-union private sector workers are covered by pensions. That means pensions have been replaced by what I call do-it-yourself retirement plans, such as 401ks. And I call it do-it-yourself because it puts the pressure on the workers. The workers have to figure out how to save, how much to save, what to invest in, and how to manage those investments. For older Americans, particularly Black women, the situation is more dire. Many older Americans have endured decades of discrimination, and as a result, they have lower levels of education, income, and wealth. Additionally, Black Americans have disproportionately suffer disproportionately from 8 of the top 13 causes of death in the United States. Black women have the lowest levels of income and wealth, which means that they need to continue to work as they age, yet health problems can limit their ability to continue working. The impact of these economic inequities has resulted in multiple generations of poverty and predictions from Prosperity Now that the average net worth of Black Americans will be zero by 2053 if nothing changes. Okay. These economic and health issues have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. 50% of Americans do not have retirement accounts, largely because they work at small companies uh, or they are part-time and do not qualify. But some of the programs that may improve those numbers are: one, auto enrollment. When a new employee starts, company automatically enrolls them in the plan, and that has improved participation dramatically. Two, a number of states have started state savings plans and require companies to actually offer these plans to employees. And three, if small companies have the option to join together to offer better plans, it reduces the cost for both the businesses and the employees. They're all complicated and interrelated issues with no single or simple solutions. But if nothing is done, we're going to see more Americans, especially Americans of color, fall into poverty. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to provide testimony and for your interest. I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks, for your statement, and Dr. Badger, you may begin.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I would like to thank the chairman, Ranking Member Scott, for hosting this hearing and inviting me to speak. I would also like to thank the committee members for attending. This is an extremely important issue for the largest minority in America, or in your state, in fact. As you heard in my introduction provided by Senator Casey, I have my doctorate and I'm a business owner. I am also a homeowner, a partner, a daughter, a friend, and of course, a dog mom. What you did not hear is that I am a person with a significant disability that I can say affects all areas of my life. I cannot put it into a category like I did with the other topics because those are just elements of my identity. But having a disability affects my entire life and all parts of my being. It is the reason why I do not walk or breathe on my own, my need for 24-hour care, my relationships, my work, and even how I earn and save money. It does not affect the way I work, earn, or save money in the way that you might think it would. I work over 40 hours a week. I can do all elements of my job without accommodations from my employers. But my disability forces me to stay poor and not save for those big steps that were mentioned earlier, the American dream or retirement in general. When I was growing up, I dreamed of being a marine biologist. Long story short, I'm on a ventilator. I don't swim. Change of plans ensued, and so I became a business owner. However, no one ever told me that, quote unquote, that's great idea for you to be a marine biologist or a professor, but you're not allowed to make that much money. No one told me not to work so hard in school, not to be valedictorian, or not to get my degrees and pursue my dreams. But that is exactly what the system is set up to do. To be prepared for success, but not be able to actually achieve it, at least financially and stability-wise. As I was graduating with my doctorate, I was thinking, now what? I had spent years completing higher ed, volunteering, and working part-time. Most of my peers were applying for fantastic jobs and comparing their offers about the best locations, opportunities, salary, and benefits, while I was trying to figure out how to not be too successful. The reason I can't be too successful is that I rely on government insurance programs such as Medicare and Medicaid for my survival. No private insurance will pay for the long-term supports and community based services that I require to just get out of bed every day and to work in the first place. These amazing programs, however, have fairly strict income and asset limits. So to be able to survive by having those services, I have to keep myself poor. To do this, I started a business so I could salary myself, but take job opportunities that I felt called to. Such a structure has allowed me to work while still receiving the medical care that could only otherwise be received through nursing homes. So if I did not get Medicare and Medicaid, I'd be in a nursing home. But this was only possible because I underpaid myself and did not have savings accounts or retirement. But I can honestly say that it is more work to be able to work than the work itself. Some of the barriers to working and economic stability did change with the ABLE account. That was the first opportunity I had to save more than $2,000 due to asset limits. In the past, I kept my income under those limits because I could not risk losing those life-sustaining services. However, I opened an ABLE account because it seemed like a good thing to do, and all the cool kids were doing it, so I did it too. At that point, I had no idea how useful it could be in my future. Then, during the pandemic, while I was in a small house renting with my partner and our 2 dogs and 2 cats, I realized how important having a space that I loved that was bigger really mattered, as I'm sure maybe some of you realized as well. I decided that it was time to buy a home. I knew that I could easily pay the monthly mortgage payments, but I did not have even close to what I needed set aside for a down payment. That is where ABLE came into play for me. It made home ownership possible. Through the little bit of savings that I put into account and a gift, I was able to purchase my home a year ago today, actually. Yesterday. That's right. According to Facebook, yesterday. This was only possible because of the ABLE's saving account. It is a wonderful program, but as it has been mentioned, the strict age criteria, with it being that you have to acquire a disability before the age of 26, really limits the number of people that can receive this type of account. We need to fix that problem. And we need to address an even bigger issue: the limitations on earning money. The Substantial Gainful Activity Limit, SGA for short, restricts how much money a person receiving Social Security, disability insurance can earn a month. There are similar limits for SSI, Medicare, and Medicaid. For SSDI, the limit is currently $1,310 for a person. That is $1,500 less than the federal poverty limit for a one-person household. Earning more than SGA means the possibility of losing life-sustaining medical and healthcare coverage, in addition to the cash benefits. Because of such policies, people with disabilities, including me, we are capping our employment and earnings, and ultimately our opportunities. It limits our success in order to just make sure that we are receiving life-preserving and sustaining care. At one point in time, the asset and income limits probably made a lot of sense. No taxpayer wants to be giving money to people who don't need it. However, with medical advancements, assistive technology, workplace accommodations, and actually changes in the work world and fields, these restrictions are actually restricting individuals from pursuing opportunities. People like myself who receive and require high level of support and medical care would not have survived previously without these advancements, let alone been able to work in previous decades. Now,
Dr.
not
Gadd,
only are we surviving, but we are
I
capable
just need you to
of
wrap up.
thriving. Thank you so much.
Doctor, thanks very much. I just want to make sure we can move through our
Mhm.
witnesses. Our fourth and final witness is Dr. John Iacofano. And he will provide his testimony, and then we'll get to questions.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee. My name is John Iacofano, and I am the owner of Iacofano's Catering in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. 20 years ago, as a struggling student with $90 to my name, I painted a building to get the down payment for a 300 square foot space to start my catering business. Iacofano's began by preparing deli trays for corporate groups and later opened 3 restaurants. Today, Iacofano's provides catering and food services to corporate events, weddings, in-flight catering, senior living facilities, and meal service for nonprofits such as Meals on Wheels. We have 85 employees in 6 locations across the country, including Charleston and Columbia, South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, West Deptford, New Jersey, a suburb of Philadelphia, Cleveland, Ohio, and Denver, Colorado. Our average employee age is 45, with the oldest being 78. During the pandemic, we were able to maintain a workforce and add additional quality employees from large corporate layoffs. As large corporations began to rehire, we were unable to keep up with the benefits they offered, specifically retirement plans. We lost one of our best employees when her former employer, an international catering company, offered to reinstate her benefits. We offered over 11% more pay plus success sharing checks, but she went back with her former employer for one simple reason. The bigger firm offered her a retirement plan. My small business attempted many times to implement our own employee retirement plan, but was shut down by the excessive fees along with plan liabilities and administrative burdens my team could not handle. At Iacofano's, we are on a mission to cover the entire circle of life of our employees, from healthcare, competitive pay, vacation, and more. However, the number one inquiry candidates and employees ask is, do you have a retirement plan? Just a few months ago, Matt Watson at NFP approached me with a possible solution to our retirement plan struggles. The Secure Act had passed through Congress and established pooled employer plans, or PEPs, allowing unrelated employers to join together to provide workplace retirement savings options without some of the costs, administrative burdens, and liability attached to sponsoring a plan on their own. 1 month later, we are on a conference call setting up our plan, and 2 months later, we are launching our first employee retirement plan at Iacofano's. The new PEP system is a plug-and-play plan that links directly to our payroll system at a low cost of $2,600 per year, broken into quarterly payments. Our plan provider offers educational classes to our team and handles all employee enrollment, legal requirements, and administrative work. These costs and administrative savings are the sole reason we are now able to offer our employees retirement benefits. Plus, these low costs allow us to offer a very competitive match. These are new dollars going into the paychecks of our valuable team members. Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee, I am thrilled to announce that as of today, our employee retirement plan is open for enrollment. For the majority of my employees, this is the first workplace retirement plan ever. On a personal note, my father was a small business owner. He passed away and the business was closed. My mother, as a stay-at-home mother for 30 years, had to reintroduce herself into the workforce. Now at 78 years of age, her current retirement plan includes $1,450 from Social Security and only $270 from a large company that she had worked at for over 10 years. Had access and education of the PEP plan been available to my family, my mother would not have to be working full-time to make ends meet in retirement. The PEP is going to help my employees engage in the retirement that they once thought they were destined to have. Our next goal is to continue to grow the diversity of employees within our company. We are fortunate to work with Babcock Centers in Columbia, South Carolina, an adult with disabilities empowerment organization. Babcock approached us over 2 years ago asking if we were willing to bring on 1 or 2 of their clients to work in our facility. With the help of a Babcock representative, we hired a gentleman named Jay. Jay continues to work for us and is a vital part of our team. If it had not been for our services providing meals to the Babcock Center, we would have never known about the opportunities to hire adults with disabilities. Small businesses need more information and availability to hire, train, and provide these new opportunities for adults with disabilities. This, along with the new PEP plan, will only help small businesses like mine become competitive employers and take care of the entire circle of life of their employees. I would be happy to help this community, or I'm sorry, I'd be happy to help this committee in any way possible to get the word out to small businesses. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony. I want to make sure that I'm correct about something. I've pronounced your name more than once now. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. I put the emphasis on Iacofano, and I thought I heard you say, I want to make sure I'm right, more like Iacofano. Can we?
Yeah, so it'd be like Iacofano really, but it's Iacofano. We say Iacofano.
Okay. I'll try to.
Iacofano. That's okay. You're not the first person to butcher our last name.
Mr. Chairman.
And you won't be the last, I'm sure.
I was wondering the same thing about Iker Ike. He just entered another element though. So we're going to be here for a long time.
Well, we're grateful
It's not good to say ick. Ick in catering would not be a good introduction.
Yes, Icky. Okay, so we'll go with Ike.
I think we have to give you extra time because of that question I just asked you. But thanks so much, and we'll turn to our questions now. I wanted to start with Dr. Badger. Doctor, I wanted to thank you for sharing your story, which is both a story about challenges you've faced, but also a story of real inspiration, what you've had to overcome to open a business and to buy a home and to do so many other things that you've related today. In your testimony, you talked about how ABLE was your first opportunity to save more than $2,000 due to asset limits for Medicaid, but you also said you hadn't really put much thought into long-term savings since you had never had the opportunity to save before. And as you put it, the way the system is set up, you said it was set up, quote, to be prepared to be successful, but not to actually be permitted to achieve success, at least financial success and stability, unquote. That's a powerful statement, and I think emblematic of what we're wrestling with here. You said that it was the COVID-19 pandemic that motivated you to start saving with a goal in mind. So here's my question. How did an ABLE account in your case help you to level the playing field for people with disabilities, in your case, but more broadly for people with disabilities who can access them?
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, I believe that ABLE is one of the fundamental areas that will allow people to be more successful. And for me, it was home ownership, and I hopefully will continue to use it to pay off that monthly mortgage of mine. But I think for other individuals, there has been a long-standing concern and teaching from the system that you as a person with a disability cannot have money. And so I know a lot of individuals who are my age and younger who are putting money under their mattresses or only working in cash, which, when I was redoing our house, we found money in our ceiling. And so we are reverting back into acts that were done during the Great Depression of saving money when possible. But the bigger issue is not having money to save in the first place. And so I think that is the next step beyond allowing more people to earn, save, and know that they're not going to lose life-sustaining care to do so.
It's very helpful to have you walk through your own personal experience. And speaking of people with personal experiences, I want to turn to Mr. Foley. We heard, as I just mentioned, from Dr. Badger that her ABLE account means what it means to her and so many in the disability community. But one of the real limitations, one of the problems we're trying to solve with the legislation is the 26-year-old limitation, meaning that the accounts are only open to people who have had a disability before their 26th birthday. So can you explain why the original ABLE Act included the age limit, which we now want to change, and why it's important to expand ABLE accounts?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, so the changing it to disability onset before age 26 was kind of a last-minute accommodation made back in 2014 from a scoring perspective for the bill. So the entire time folks were, advocating for it and talking about it, a much larger group of people had been envisioned. So it was mostly for scoring purposes. To the second part of your question, we estimate that there are as many as 6 million people who would be newly eligible if the Able Age Adjustment Act happened. And those are people whose, obviously, their disability happened after age 26. Maybe that was an accident. Maybe that was an illness picked up later in life, or someone from military service. Having worked in this space for quite a while, it's really difficult to meet a 27-year-old who's recently spinal cord injured and tell them there's this great product out there, but it's not for you. Or someone coming back from a tour of duty who's been injured, fighting for this country and telling him that, or her, that ABLE is not for them. There are 1 million veterans that could be eligible for ABLE, and it's imperative that ABLE be extended to be able to be of benefit from a financial standpoint, from a support standpoint, and from a long-term economic development standpoint for those individuals.
Mr. Foley, thanks very much. I'll turn to Ranking Member Scott for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that Senator Lee is available now for questions, and I'm happy to defer to Senator Lee if he's still available for questions now, and I'll take the second round.
Senator Lee?
Sounds good. Mr. Iacofano, quick question for you. I know that the Secure Act provided you with an opportunity to start your retirement account today. Congratulations. As a former small business owner myself, I understand and appreciate the excitement that when you're able to offer new benefits for that extended family, as I discussed in my opening comments, it really is heartwarming for you and certainly good for your employees. I know that there are several parts or aspects of the Secure Act that can be helpful, whether it's reducing the price or helping to cover the liability exposure. Which of the two or other aspects of the Secure Act help you start your retirement account today?
There's multiple aspects. One major one is obviously $2,600 a year is the cost to me, yes, broken apart in quarterly payments, which is huge. Then you have the administrative, the fiduciary, the entire liability basically is being handled by the plan itself. Where with the old plan, before you guys put this new Secure Act through, the old plan had the one bad apple part of it, and everybody could be liable in the plan. And this got rid of that, which is excellent. The new plan helped to do that. So this two is the liability and the very low cost of $2,600.
During your opening comments, you made a statement that caught my attention. I want to ask you a question and give you a little more time to expound upon the importance of the competitive advantage that comes with the ability to offer retirement programs to your employees. You talked about losing a key employee, or at least an important employee, because they were able to have a retirement system. They turned down an 11% wage increase in order to have an opportunity to secure resources in retirement. How important is having something like the Secure Act in place and you launching your own retirement plan and retaining your best and brightest employees?
I will not be competitive if I do not offer retirement This allows me to not only offer retirement, become competitive, be able to obtain new team members. It also, due to the low cost, it also allows me to match. We'll be matching 100% on the first 3% and 50% on 4 and 5%, which makes me extremely competitive against very large corporations and puts us on the same level.
Mr. Iacofano, I would say that you're doing better than most corporations. 100% on the first 3% is pretty remarkable. That is fantastic. It tells me that you care about your employees. That is
well, it's the low cost.
Fantastic.
It's the low cost. I'm sorry.
It allows you to transfer those resources or the benefits to your employees through the additional matching opportunities. That's good. That's being a good employer and something that we should all celebrate. You also do something else that I think is really important to the workplace and very important to maximizing human flourishing. You look for ways to hire folks who are very talented, who might have varying skill sets, different talents, but also different challenges to coming to the workforce. And I know that you have done a good job of offering opportunities to folks with disabilities. How can we encourage more companies to follow your path in recruiting and retaining vital workforce talent to include those folks with special needs or disabilities?
Well, I was fortunate enough to work with Babcock Center, or else I wouldn't have even known that there was such a thing as employing adults with disabilities, and nor would I even know the need for it. We have very talented workers out there that need jobs. I believe in South Carolina alone and in Pennsylvania, the unemployment rate for adults with disabilities in Pennsylvania, I believe, is 61%. And South Carolina is about 67%. Transportation is a huge need. Jay, who is an adult with disability and been with us for over 2 years, we pick him up and drop him off to work, pick him up from home and drop him off at home every day. Transportation is huge. And how can we create the space, or what needs do the adults with disabilities have in the workforce, whether it's special equipment, whether it's the ride to work? What do they need to come to get to work and be able to be successful at work is the question, and that's where I believe our resources can go.
Thank you, Mr. Iacofano. With my last 30 or 40 seconds, Mr. Brooks, I'd like to ask you a question about retirement portability. Said simply, when you have a small retirement account, $5,000, $6,000, you change jobs. Oftentimes, what happens is what we call leakage. You just take that money that's in your retirement account and you cash it out. You pay a penalty. You have to claim it as ordinary income, and those retirement dollars are gone. I worked with the DOL and a guy named Bob Johnson to help create the framework for auto portability between retirement plans. How important is this reform for those living in the underserved communities, and how can we continue this progress?
Yeah, I think portability is critical. And as you said, people cash out the plans, especially if they have a small amount. And part of it is the companies don't encourage you to merge them. But I think what might help that is some financial education, because many of the people who cash out are low income or young. And I don't think they realize the tax implications when they do cash out until they have to file their tax returns.
And then it's a big surprise.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Scott. We'll turn next to Senator Kelly.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to follow up on a couple of Senator Scott's questions. So this question is for Dr. Badger. So, Dr. Badger, Employment First is a framework that seeks to make integrated employment the goal and priority for states and public systems. In 2017, Governor Ducey, the governor of Arizona, signed an executive order declaring Arizona an employment first state, which required state agencies to partner with outside vendors to improve job opportunities for people with a disability. Stakeholders across the state worked collaboratively to make this happen. Arizona is one of many states working on this, and it's a priority for the Federal Department of Labor. So could you describe some successes that you've seen that more states should try to emulate?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. And I was through the hashtag I Want to Work campaign, we work to establish our employment first legislation. And I think what we're seeing, and it's really trend based, is that states that have had employment first, specifically legislation and executive directives, they are having progressively more individuals with disabilities who are employed. And I think that if you start looking at the numbers, and there was a recent report put out by ACL, 30 years of community living, you will see that the states that have had those pieces of legislation on the books longest have the highest employment rates. And so I think we need to look at the data to show the success.
Beyond the legislation that's already on the books, what are the top one or two ideas to continue to increase the employment rate for adults with disabilities?
I think going forward, we are looking at making sure that that mindset of employment first, making sure that competitive, integrative employment is the mindset that we hope for all individuals, starting with IEPs in high school, is key. And endorsing that as a state, but also really working on the collaborative efforts that you mentioned to make sure that our policies and actions in the country, state, and locally truly support that employment work of people with disabilities.
Well, thank you, Dr. Badger.
Thank you.
Mr. Foley. So, Mr. Foley, your testimony mentioned the increased likelihood that individuals with disabilities will be underbanked. And we know that asset and income limits make saving complicated. I'm also curious about access to credit. Could you describe what the challenges are for gaining access to credit and building credit over a lifetime for adults with disabilities?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So we've done research that indicates that folks with disabilities are 2 to 3 times less likely to have access to the credit they need than the general population. This goes along, I think, generally with the information about being underbanked. Basically, people with disabilities would benefit greatly from financial education, financial counseling, credit education, and credit counseling. Many of the financial education curriculums out there and credit bureaus are more and more doing a lot of work to try to reach low and moderate income communities. And we work closely with several of them to make sure that people with disabilities are included in that work. Many people with disabilities are also what's known as credit invisible. If you don't have a bank account and you're not working, there aren't a lot of accounts for credit bureaus to pull from. So I know the industry is working on new models to help alleviate these issues, because it is definitely a concern with regard to credit access for folks with disabilities.
Mr. Foley, do the credit agencies use any different standards for individuals with disabilities?
I would certainly, from an income standpoint, SSI and SSDI, qualifies as income. And I do know that from a scores perspective, medical debt has begun to be treated differently in recent years with regard to its impact on credit scores. So I guess the short answer to that is yes, to some extent, but there is still more work to be done.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Foley, and thank you, Dr. Badger.
Senator Kelly, thanks very much. Now we'll turn to Senator Lee, who is joining us virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Savings and investments enable us to serve our respective communities and increase our future capacity to afford necessities. Financial capital, in fact, underpins social capital. Savings allow us to form and expand families and to surround ourselves with neighbors and institutions that enrich our lives. Savings make retirement possible, which provides us with the opportunity to invest ourselves and our time more deeply in our communities. Mr. Iacofano, what are some of the ways in which empowering your employees with the opportunity to save for retirement might have a trickle-down effect that benefits other members of the community in the Mount Pleasant area? For example, do you think that making retirement savings possible for your employees allows them to invest their time and their resources more fully in their communities?
Well, you're talking about having to have people unprepared for retirement and having to work, you're going to work all the way till your 70s and your 80s because Social Security is not going to give you the full retirement that you need. So therefore, in the community, are you able to be part of your community more? Are you able to donate time to your community? Or are you going to be working 50, 60 hours a week when you're 70, 80 years old? Really, right? As you age, you start to donate more time and resources and knowledge to your community. Are we going to have the ability for our aging population to do that? Is the question. And I would say no.
Thank you. In 2019, Congress passed legislation that created pooled employer plans to provide businesses with more flexibility in how they can band together with other businesses to offer retirement plans to their employees. I've heard from Utah companies and Utahns seeking to save for retirement that this has been a great benefit to them. Mr. Iacofano, you mentioned in your testimony that the ability to provide these pooled employer plans, or PEPs, to your employees will change the retirement that they once thought they were entitled to have. How have these plans benefited your employees? And are there any additional barriers that you face as you seek to create opportunities for your employees to achieve their retirement and the kind of retirement they desire?
The biggest barrier is knowledge and understanding of how important it is. Right? When you're 20, 30, maybe in your 40s, you're not even thinking about retirement. You're not thinking that's way off in the future. So by starting this plan, it forces my company to educate all levels, all age levels of employee within the company, and it begins to focus on the retirement. And with the match, with the PEP and the Secure Act being put in, it allows me, due to it's being so low cost, allows me to match. So what that's going to do is really, as any employee, you should be donating 5% of your wages, because we're going to be matching 4%. So now you're putting 9% away towards retirement. Okay, and whether you do that 401k or Roth is up to you, but 9% will be put away, and you're donating 5%, and we're giving you 4%. So this is allowing us to educate what typically somebody would not be paying attention to.
Well, thank you. That's helpful. Mr. Brooks, you mentioned in your testimony that under the majority of today's retirement plans, the responsibility falls on individuals to figure out how much to save and what to invest and how to manage their investments. What's your assessment, Mr. Brooks, of the financial literacy of Americans when it comes to retirement savings? And is there better financial literacy for some types of retirement savings accounts than for others?
Well, financial literacy as a whole, there are more courses offered at the actually mandatory courses at the high school level where I think they have to start, but not that many. So so when it comes to financial literacy as a whole, I think we're pretty weak. Now, there are companies who, along with their plans, offer some sort of support, but my experience has been that many do not. So when I say employees are left to themselves, they can call possibly an 800 number, but at one time, human resources companies, human resources departments offer that kind of assistance, and now companies have cut back, so that's not available anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see my time's expired.
Senator Lee, thanks very much. I want to acknowledge some senators who joined our hearing, Senator Rick Scott, as well as Senator Warnock. And I know we're awaiting some other senators to arrive, so in the interim, I'll start with another question, but if other senators arrive, I'll cut myself off. I wanted to turn to Mr. Rodney Brooks. Mr. Brooks, you examined the real-world impact of retirement policy on people working hard to save for their future. Many proposals that have been discussed today have looked at ways to improve retirement accounts for people who already have access. But we've also heard from people who face steep barriers to long-term and stable employment or career advancement, which would provide them access to retirement accounts. Unfortunately, we know that communities of color and people with disabilities are more severely impacted by these issues. So I'm asking you kind of a question that you made reference to in your opening, but I wanted to reiterate some of it. What steps need to be taken to increase long-term savings for those who have traditionally struggled to access stable retirement accounts, such as those holding multiple jobs or facing difficulty holding a job long-term?
Okay, well, one option I think is the state savings plans that are being offered. I think a dozen states are offering it, but again, those are offered through mostly through employers. One option might be a baby bonds type program that's been proposed by economist William Darity and in legislation proposed by Senator Booker that would basically provide say $1,000 to a baby born anywhere, and the amount depends on the income of the parents. So by the time they are 18, they'll have some income to invest for either college education or to buy a house. And Morningstar basically said a baby bond program would cut the racial wealth gap in half. So.
Thanks very much, and appreciate you bringing your experience to bear in providing suggestions for steps we can take. I want to turn next to Dr. Badger and Mr. Foley, maybe a kind of a joint answer or a question for both, depending on who wants to take it first. But you've both worked over the years to improve economic access for people with disabilities, and you both have personal experience with some of these challenges we've talked about. Mr. Foley, your work at the national level, and Dr. Badger, your work in Pennsylvania, have given you important perspectives in this work, not only professionally but personally. Mr. Foley, in your testimony, you put it simply. You said, quote, "Asset and income limits discourage savings, work, and hope," unquote. You've both discussed, both Dr. Badger and Mr. Foley have both discussed the asset limit for federal benefits and how ABLE accounts have helped address part of that issue or part of that problem, but other challenges remain. Maybe we'll start with Dr. Badger, because I know you made reference to some of these issues when I was calling the time or cutting you off for time. What are the one or two other actions that you think we need to take to make it possible for more people with disabilities to obtain jobs and be able to plan for their economic future? So I'll go with Dr. Badger. I'll give Pennsylvania priority here, and then Mr. Foley.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. So I think that we need to look at other options allowing people to earn more. And I think some of that is expanding the Medicaid buy-in for workers with disabilities. Pennsylvania, it's called MAWD, Medical Assistance for Workers with Disabilities. The other part is we need to start looking at these issues such as retirement. At this point, we those of us who require medical assistance, Medicaid, Medicare, or cash benefits cannot have liquid savings accounts. We cannot have retirement that can be liquidated. And so we need to start looking at different savings plans that can be permissible that would allow us to retire. ABLE's wonderful, and they're still saying it will take about $1 million to retire comfortably, and that's not even close to what we can save. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Mr. Foley.
Thank you, Senator. So, yeah, Medicaid buy-in programs, and I'd like to put out the idea a national Medicaid buy-in program that met certain criteria that was portable would certainly go a long way to helping people with disabilities seize new opportunities outside of a state that they might be currently working in. I still think ABLE Age Adjustment Act is a huge piece of what we've seen drives savings, drives work, drives small business development. But I will circle back to that original quote. We are telling 18-year-old kids with disabilities not to save, not to work, and even if you do, you won't be able to save your money. We have got to do something about that $2,000 asset limit, because those are the formative years. That first job, that second job where you learn a work ethic, you learn that you can save money to buy baseball tickets or go out to eat or whatever, are just really, really important for building long-term stable employment. Without those experiences, without those learnings, a lot of people with disabilities won't be able to build that career, build that retirement account, and purchase the house. So I think we definitely have to do something about that $2,000 asset limit as well.
Thanks very much. I'll turn next to Senator Braun, and then after that, Ranking Member Scott, if you want to start another round. Senator Braun, who I think is joining us virtually.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Casey. My question here in a moment is going to be related to not building wealth in the sense of retirement plans and so forth. It's going to be preserving wealth. Being a business owner, I found it easier to put together, especially when you get to a certain size, good retirement plans. The real wrestling match and the depleter of wealth in many cases is your wrestling match you have with the healthcare system. My question is for Mr. Iacofano, in the sense that I know he used the concept of pooling, allowing smaller businesses and entities to pool together to get some of the benefits that you get in any case where you align forces, you kind of increase your bargaining power. I'm concerned that whatever you do there, as you're running a company, you still have the biggest challenge for your company and your employees, and it's our broken healthcare system. 13 years ago, I took it on when I had 300 employees, just large enough to where you didn't need to pool to get the benefits that were largely not there for companies my size. I'm interested in seeing what your issues have been with healthcare, because I think it's very analogous, and I think it is the biggest depleter of wealth because of the costs and the fact that in my case, I was able to freeze healthcare costs, make my employees engaged consumers focusing on avoiding the system, paying for 100% of wellness, but getting them to be in unison with me to take on a challenge that now has, unlike many other companies, become something that is not as dominating as it used to be. Mr. Iacofano, I'd be interested to hear your challenges with healthcare. Do you think pooling and associating by being able to team up with other companies your size would be a beneficial tool? The healthcare industry makes it tough to do. Let me know your thoughts on healthcare as being analogous to what you did with retirement?
Thank you, Senator Braun. This is, I don't know that we have enough time for this discussion. Every year, it is a challenge for me to just keep my health care. I don't have enough participation, yet we pay approximately over 76% of the healthcare costs for our team members. Every year, I have to increase the cost, the deductibles, and everything and the cost of the healthcare goes up. So the deductibles go up, the healthcare goes up. I tried to take on more of the burden, and I cannot get the importance of healthcare. The education of the importance of healthcare is very difficult as well, for employees to understand, especially depending on the age, whether somebody needs healthcare. To do a pooled employer plan would be unbelievable. As a matter of fact, I'm from Cleveland originally, and when my father was a small business owner, Cleveland had something like that. We only had 3 or 4 employees, but we benefited at the time. I can't remember the name of it, but I know we benefited at the time from that pooled employer healthcare plan that was provided. It was some type of business group that was together. So that would be unbelievable. And every year I am sweating whether or not we're going to be able to even provide insurance for our team. Sorry.
So for you and anyone else listening out there today, I've dropped a bill called the Fair Care Act, which is the most comprehensive approach to what you could do here in the federal government to make it consumer driven, embrace transparency, embrace competition. The industry runs like an unregulated utility in that they disguise themselves as being free enterprise with none of the characteristics. I think that we need to pay attention to that, because regardless of what you do on retirement and keeping your bottom line healthy, it's like a tapeworm on your business. And I think Warren Buffett coined that term. So I'd be happy to re-engage with you where we have more time. Anyone else listening out there, get a hold of my office if you want to see what we can do through the federal government. And sadly, the clout of pharma, of hospitals, providers, and insurance is so heavy that most Democrats who bring healthcare as the most important issue there run into issues where they're not willing to reform the industry before they want more government involved with it. I think you need to do the reform first before you tackle how government gets more involved with it. And for you and any other small businesses out there, reach out to our office. I'll share with you what I did in my own company to keep healthcare costs flat and to where my employees are healthier and spend less on healthcare now than they did 13 years ago. I think my time is up, and that's a lot to digest. Thanks for taking the question. Let's re-engage down the road.
Thanks, Senator Braun. I'll turn to our ranking member, Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to talk to Mr. Brooks about the importance of financial literacy for some portion of my time. It's important for us to recognize that financial literacy is critically important, but we should start the conversation not when we're in our 50s or early 60s, but in our 20s. Frankly, even in high school, it'd be important for us to have that engagement, because as we know that the magic of compounding interest takes time, but if we have time, it is miraculous, comparatively speaking, to starting your conversation about retirement in your 40s. Mr. Brooks, would you like to weigh in on the importance of starting early in the financial education and then starting early with investing in your own retirement?
Sure. As I mentioned before, a good first step would be some sort of requirement of financial literacy courses in high school, and there has been some good success for some programs that have actually started before high school. One of the advantages of a program with financial education for people in elementary school, for instance, and there are some like Ariel Academy in Chicago, is that in addition to teaching the kids, they teach the parents as well. But I think the biggest help would be requiring, basically making a financial literacy course a requirement in high schools and maybe even junior high schools. Now, as people get older, it's harder, but it's still important. And I think using people going into community centers, senior centers, I think all of that's useful. And now we're actually seeing professional athletes basically take on the cause, and I think that can make a big impact with young people.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I know that a few years ago, Chairman and I started something called Financial Football, where we partnered with the NFL and Visa to bring a Madden-type game of football to high schools throughout the country. And specifically, we started at home in South Carolina at my alma mater, Stall High School, and we literally had teams playing against each other, students joining teams. We brought in a couple of Carolina Panthers to coach the team so that we could have a conversation and a debate around issues of savings and retirement and investments like mutual funds versus individual stocks and derivatives. And the more complicated the question, the more yards you gained, or the pass was like a Hail Mary. That turned out to be a lot of fun. If we can find a way to make financial literacy a little more engaging, financial education a little more interesting for some of the young folks in 8th and 9th grade, we might find ourselves in having a better future for those young folks when they are entering into the retirement years. I'll close with this comment. When I was selling financial plans and some retirement plans, I would say to the folks I was talking to that a 19-year-old that saves $100 a month at 12% interest will likely have more money than the 45-year-old that saves $1,000 a month at the same interest when they hit age 65.
It's remarkable. Well, Ranking Member Scott, thank you for those questions, and we're approaching the end of our time, so I wanted to provide a closing statement, and then I'll turn to Ranking Member Scott. As we heard today, millions of Americans face barriers to achieving economic independence and a secure retirement. People with disabilities and communities of color face unique and overlapping challenges. Federal asset limits make it easier for people with disabilities to keep their incomes low than to build long-term savings accounts, or build a long-term saving account. Workplace biases keep both people with disabilities and communities of color in lower paying and sometimes in multiple low paying jobs. These challenges are building up over lifetimes and across generations, making the dream of retirement almost impossible to achieve for so many. We must find ways to eliminate the employment gap and the wage gap that's faced by people with disabilities and folks in communities of color. Passing legislation like the Able Age Adjustment Act, Senate Bill 331, will provide millions of Americans with disabilities, including over 1 million veterans, a pathway to savings. I look forward to working with all my colleagues to advance this critical legislation and other policies that we've heard about today to address these issues. And I want to thank, in particular, Ranking Member Scott for his own perspective on this and his ideas, and for bringing his own personal experience to bear on these issues. So, Ranking Member Scott, I turn to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you once again for holding a very important hearing that so many Americans, especially folks in the golden years and people with disabilities, will learn important information as they watch this over and over again, I'm sure. This is an important hearing about an important topic that will have an impact positively or negatively on retirement years for so many folks. It's my heart that we can do better, and we can do better in educating and informing the public about the importance of starting early. We can do better about informing the public about good legislation that's been passed, whether it's the one that you've been talking about at the Secure Act. It's really important for us to look at strong business owners like John Iacofano, who started his retirement plan for his employees today with a 100% match. The more education we have, the better off our people will be, and the more we will enjoy those golden years. I want to thank Neri, my staff director, as well as my staff, and Ben Hobbs helped put this together for us today. And nothing happens by yourself. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So we are really blessed to be surrounded with really highly educated individuals that are motivated to make sure that every single American has a better chance in retirement than they did before this hearing. Thank you for your hard work, and I look forward to our next hearing.
Ranking Member Scott, thanks very much. And I want to reiterate what you said about our staffs. We're lucky. Stacy Sanders is over my left shoulder here. It certainly fits that description of someone who works with her team to make these hearings informative and make it possible for us to have a hearing like we've had today.
And Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to mention my other staff is behind me as well, Sarah.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks. So if any senators have additional questions for the witnesses or statements to be added, the hearing record will be kept open for 7 days until next Thursday, July 22nd. But again, I want to thank our witnesses for bringing their testimony today and making themselves available, and especially bringing their expertise to bear, both personal and professional, on these issues that confront so many communities. Thank you all for participating today. This concludes our hearing.